My first guest tonight is a man who helped bring Israelis and Palestinians as close to peace as anyone. Yossi Beilin is considered the architect of the 1994 Oslo Accords between Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. He served as Minister of Justice and Religious Affairs under Prime Minister Ehud Barak, and since then he has remained committed to a path to peace. Just last year, he supported a proposal for an Israeli-Palestinian confederation, an idea that seemingly fell on deaf ears. Mr. Beilin, it's good to have you with us tonight. This week,
Thank you for having me.
When you look at what happened at the UN this week, when the UN Secretary General said that the October 7th attack did not happen in a vacuum, that prompted Israel's UN ambassador to demand that the Secretary General resign. What did you think when that happened?
Well, Antonio Guterres is somebody who supports Israel, who believes in Israel, who believes in peace, who was shocked by what he saw in the region. And regretfully, he was rejected when he asked to visit Israel a few days ago. I don't know why the Israeli government decided to do something like that. He made a huge mistake by saying that the attack, the crazy ISIS kind of attack against babies and women and old people was not in a vacuum, because it was not a situation that in which the Hamas people are saying, we would like to have peace with Israel, we would like to divide the land, we would like to live in peace, and it is impossible. And because they are unemployed, and because they are under Israeli indirect rule, they had to do something. No, this is not the situation. That perhaps was the situation of the first intifada of the Palestinians against Israel in 1987. What happened is something which is totally crazy. It is not written anywhere. And rather than totally rejecting it, he gave the impression, although he did not say that he understood what Hamas did, but if it was not in a vacuum, then you give some kind of legitimacy. The demand that he would resign is a big mistake of Israel. I don't think that he deserves such an attitude of Israel towards him.
Let me ask you, this week on Wednesday in the Times of Israel, the Israeli writer Yossi Klein Halevi wrote, "To blame the occupation and its consequences wholly on Israel is to dismiss the history of Israeli peace offers and Palestinian rejection." Has the world forgotten what you and others achieved with the Oslo Accords in 1994?
You know, such a question to which the answer is positive could be asked and should be asked vis-a-vis the PLO. The PLO is our partner, and we had ups and downs with the PLO. Hamas is something else. Hamas doesn't want anything from us. They don't want to divide the land. They don't want to have peace with Israel. And this is why it was a mistake to allow Hamas to run in the elections of 2006 and to remain in the leadership of Gaza, despite of all the violent encounters that we had with each other. But the point is that the Israeli right saw Hamas as a better interlocutor or neighbor than the PLO, because the PLO wanted and wants to divide the land. This is the major issue between us and them. And rather than understanding that this was also the interest of Israel, they preferred an interlocutor who didn't want anything from us, but that we will disappear.
Mr. Beilin, I want to come back to Hamas in just a second, but I want to stick with history for a moment. The Oslo Accords, they did not mention the establishment of a Palestinian state. Was that a mistake? Is that something you regret now?
This was a request of the Palestinians. They said, we don't want to mention the Palestinian state as one of the issues that should be solved towards the permanent agreement. There were 5 issues like borders, refugees, Jerusalem, and not a Palestinian state. Mm-hmm. And they explained it because they said this is our right for self-determination. And we don't need from you any negotiations of the principle of the Palestinian state. So it is not that Israel said, no way we should talk about the Palestinian state. I mean, all the negotiators knew that we were talking about or thinking about the Palestinian state. There is no other solution. What are they going to have? A club? I mean, it is a state, but it is not mentioned because they said that they didn't want to discuss it. They didn't want to negotiate it because that was their right. This is the reason. So the question is whether it was possible to get in 93 a permanent agreement rather than an interim agreement of 5 years. Mm-hmm. And when I understood that we had partners in Oslo, the PLO people were people with whom I believe we could strike a deal. I went to Rabin, to the Prime Minister, and I said to him, Mr. Prime Minister, I believe that we should not try to have a 5-year agreement right now. There is an opportunity, which may be very rare, to go for the permanent agreement so that the extremists on both sides will not have the opportunity to thwart our efforts. He explained that he preferred to go along the Madrid conference guidelines, the American guidelines of an interim agreement for 5 years, rather than getting directly to a permanent agreement, which may not succeed. The negotiations may not succeed for a permanent agreement. And I believe that this was a very big mistake.
Mr. Beilin, let me bring it up now to the president. In an interview last month, about 3 weeks before the October 7th attacks, you gave an interview to the Spanish newspaper El País, and you were quoted as saying, the Palestinians tragically have become resigned to their limited options, and this disappointment fuels the divide between Hamas and Fatah. Would you say that today, considering this global chorus of support that we are seeing now for the Palestinians in Gaza?
Well, this support is very problematic. You know, the people who belong to the PLO are the biggest enemies of Hamas. Hamas, as you know, threw them from the roofs of Gaza in 2007. When they took Gaza by force. I mean, even now when we are trying to think about what should be in the morning after the end of the war, who should rule Gaza if Israel succeeds to prevent the Hamas from continuing and rule Gaza, then the PLO is not in a hurry to get there, to get back to Gaza because of the animosity towards them. So even when you hear that in Jordan and in other places, people are saying, or comparing what the Hamas did on that Black Saturday a few weeks ago, and what Israel in its retaliation does, you know that if you know the people, you know their motivations, you know that Hamas is an enemy of many, many forces in the Middle East who would like to see Israel distancing them from governing the Gaza Strip. But they cater to their public opinions. And this is a problem.
You said before the October 7th attacks that the Jewish settlements in the West Bank were one of the biggest obstacles to peace. The current government, the one that was in place before October 7th, it was the first ever in Israel to make annexation of the West Bank a stated objective in its coalition agreement. I mean, that had to really sting for someone like you.
Well, I believe that the current government of Israel, led by Netanyahu, is a big obstacle for peace by itself. And encouraging more settlements or more housing units in the current settlements is a very, very big obstacle. And one of the ideas that I suggested, but not only me, it is a group of Palestinians and Israelis. The Palestinian group is led by Dr. Hiba Husseini, is to have, as you mentioned before, a confederation, the Holy Land Confederation of Israel and Palestine in the future, which will allow all those settlers who will find themselves in the Palestinian state once we draw a border between Israel and Palestine to remain there in Palestine as residents of Palestine and citizens of Israel, while the same number of Palestinian citizens who would like to live in Israel will be allowed to do that as permanent residents. So then you can really take off the table the issue of evacuating hundreds of thousands of settlers. And if that is removed, I believe that the way for an agreement will be open. And since sometimes in history, or many times in history, the efforts for peace were accelerated as a result of wars, I hope that this very sad situation, when we see ourselves now fighting in Gaza, and of course civilians are hit and suffer and pay the price, even if we are telling them in advance, you have to leave their homes, even that is not such a big or positive announcement for them. I believe that it might, the current situation, the current tragic situation may be an acceleration towards peace if we are wise enough to use this opportunity.
Well, that is a positive way to end our segment, Mr. Beilin. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but we certainly appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts with us tonight, Mr. Yossi Beilin. Thank you.
Thank you very much.